The Plaid Peacock by Sandy Allen, illustrated by Kelly Oxley. I think that's right. I could be wrong. It's not a word I've heard before. The Plaid Peacock by Sandy Allen. All of this, you must understand, happened in India a long time ago, so long ago indeed that soldiers of the British Queen, Victoria was her name, and quite a crusty old girl she was, marched all over India's mountains and plains and jungles to show who was boss in that far-off land. Today, of course, India is very much her own boss. The British soldiers are gone forever, and this story, I expect, could not happen. Long ago, then, there was a perky young peahen, and oh, she was stubborn. She had a mind of her own, that one. She didn't like anyone ever to tell her what to do. One day she was busily scratching out a nest in the warm earth of a grassy field. The field lay between a slow, dreamy stream and the forest where the peacocks and peahens roosted at night. "Oh, no, no, no," the older, wiser ladies of the flock screamed. Peacocks and peahens always talk at the top of their lungs. "That nest will be trampled when those dreadful soldiers come marching on their way to wherever it is they march to when they march." "The place to nest," shouted one, "is at the edge of the forest." "Out of their way," explained another. But the stubborn peahen had other things on her mind. Eggs, her own eggs that were on the way, that is. She would need a nice nest for them, and soon. So she scratched away at the hollow she had made in the middle of the field while the crest on her head quivered with impatience. It wasn't long before she was sitting cozily over 3 smooth, ivory-colored eggs, warming them with the soft feathers of her breast. Once in a while she turned them gently, ever so gently, on the nest's earthen floor. Early one morning a strange faraway sound floated toward the field. It was a little like a squeal, a little like a squall, something like a whimper, but like a wail most of all. "Caw, caw, caw!" screamed the peacocks. "Here they come!" "Everybody out of the way!" squawked the peahens as the wailing grew louder. With a flutter of feathers the flock took to the air. Screaming with excitement, they flew to their perches at the forest's edge. Look at them all flying. But the peahen far out in the field simply settled more firmly over her eggs. She wasn't going anywhere, not her. And then, crump, 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 out of the forest and into the field tramped Her Majesty's Scottish Fusiliers, stepping in time to the wailing bagpipes. Crump, 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 crump. As the soldiers marched straight at her nest, the peahen thought, "This isn't so good." Crump, 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 crump. Suddenly she was very much afraid. Crump, 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 crump. "Oh, why didn't I listen to the others?" she cried to herself. "In a minute I'll surely be trampled and my eggs will be crushed." The peahen trembled. The earth beneath her shook from the pounding boots. She could still fly to safety, of course, but no, she would not leave her eggs, though she was so afraid she thought her heart would stop beating. Crump, 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 crump. "Hello, what's this?" The first piper looked down and saw the bird shivering at his feet. "Pardon me, my lady," he said. "'Twas very clumsy o' me." And he led the soldiers around the nest and the eggs and the frightened peahen. From the treetops the rest of the flock screamed, "Caw, caw, caw!" The little fool was nearly done for. But in their noisy way they were happy for her just the same. The very next day came a tap-tap-tapping of tough little beaks inside the eggs. Before long the shells were cracked open, and out struggled 3 balls of damp feathers. Out of each ball stuck a pair of shaky, toothpicky legs. 2 of the chicks were peahens. The third was a peacock. 2 girl chicks and a boy chick. As the months passed, the chicks grew and grew. Their feathers turned from buffy brown to blue and green and purple and black and gray. The feathers of the little peacock were brightest of all, far brighter than his sisters', and the more he grew, the more he glowed. In time, his tail quills would be strong enough to hold up in a fountain of gay covering feathers that decorated with shining eyes. He would have a glorious train like the older peacocks. But as his train grew, the flock noticed something decidedly different about it. Where it should have had lovely shimmering colors dotted with sparkling eyes, it had stripes. Some up and some down, some side to side, some narrow, some wide. Wonder what's going on here. That's what happens when you don't listen to us about nests and things, the busybodies told his mother. Nonsense, she replied. He's a very special kind of peacock, that's all. But to herself she wept. Does he have to be so different? Life can be hard if you are as different as he is. The young peacock, too, could tell something was wrong. For one thing, when he strutted proudly before the girls of the flock, the ninnies giggled and ran away. One afternoon in despair, he walked to the bank of the stream and looked at his upraised train in that watery mirror. No eyes, he said to himself, not a single blessed eye, nothing but these silly stripes. No wonder they laugh at me. Imagine a peacock with such a tail. After that, he stopped strutting and raising his train. He began to stray farther and farther from the flock, thinking unhappy thoughts about his fateful feathers. Only in the evening did he return to roost with the flock in the treetops. When the others screamed a friendly greeting to him, he hardly ever replied. One day he followed a forest trail so far he wondered if he would be able to return to the flock before nightfall. But why worry? He asked himself. A lot they care. Suddenly the trail opened into a great clearing. Within it rose a log wall, and wasn't that a gate in the wall? He moved closer to see what lay inside, and what an exciting sight it was. Oh my! There were row upon row of thatched huts with wide paths between them. Dozens of soldiers were walking about or lounging in the shade. For this was the compound of the Scottish Fusiliers, the very soldiers who so often marched across the field in which he had been born. Slowly he walked through the gate. Now will you look at that? A soldier cried. It's one of those birds from the other side of the wood. Many of his companions turned to stare in astonishment. Soon quite a crowd had gathered to admire the peacock. This is more like it, he thought, and to thank the soldiers he raised the mighty fan of his tail and strutted as he had never strutted before. The soldiers could scarcely believe their eyes. It couldn't be, yet it was, a peacock with plaid feathers, and not just any old plaid, but the very plaid of their regiment. But when one of them walked forward to catch him, the peacock screamed in fear and flew off to the forest. He had had enough excitement for one day. However, in the weeks that followed, he returned to the compound many times. The soldiers put out grain for him to eat and a bowl of drinking water. As the news passed from compound to compound, soldiers from all the country round came to see the plaid peacock of the Scottish. Of course, even after they had seen him, they didn't believe what they saw. They've managed to paint the bird, they muttered, or maybe it's some other low trick. At last the peacock had found a place where he could be happy, where no one laughed at him, where his odd train brought only exclamations of wonder and delight. So it was that he returned contentedly to the forest each night. There, roosting with the rest of the flock, he often thought of the soldiers and wondered how he could repay their kindness. It wasn't too long before he found out. It had been a very dry summer. In the field, the grass turned brown, and the underbrush in the forest whispered dryly when hot breezes blew among the trees. One evening at sunset, a horrid crackling startled the flock. Fire! A long, wriggling line of flame was crawling toward them across the field. Screaming encouragement to each other, the birds took to the air, flying over the flaming field to the far bank of the stream. There they milled around excitedly as they watched the fire chew its way into the forest. They were much too busy to notice that one of the flock was missing. The Plaid Peacock was not among them. Wonder what he's doing. He had started for safety with the others. Then he thought, who will warn the soldiers? Suppose the fire reaches the compound before my friends can escape. In an instant, he changed course, winging back toward the forest. As he passed over the first treetops, thin fingers of flame reached for him. His wing feathers and his train were badly scorched, but on he flew. When he reached the sleeping compound, he dropped to the ground, screaming, "Caw, caw, caw!" Over and over he screamed until at last one sleepy soldier stumbled out of a hut. "Will ye stop that infernal racket, you loony bird?" cried the soldier. "What's got into you, making a noise like that in the middle of the night?" The peacock kept right on screaming. Soon other soldiers woke up and began to shout at him, and then, in the distance, they saw the wild orange light of burning brush moving toward the compound. At last they understood why the peacock had paid them this noisy visit. Swiftly the whole compound was aroused, and away the regiment marched to safety. The last soldier in the column saw the peacock still crouched on the ground, too tired to move. He saw, too, the poor singed feathers. In an instant he swept the bird into his arms and carried him off. This time the peacock was not afraid. Next day the flock returned to the blackened field. The birds knew that when the rains came, grass would once again clothe the earth and the trees would come to leaf. They noticed then that the Plaid Peacock was gone. Caught in the fire, no doubt, they agreed. The ladies tried to console his mother. Poor fellow, they croaked. Perhaps it was for the best. He was so different, you know. But even as they mourned, a gentle breeze sprang up, and from the distance came a sound a little like a squeal, a little like a squall, something like a whimper, but like a wail most of all. "Here they come!" screamed the peacocks. "Everybody out of the way!" squawked the peahens. And in less time than it takes to tell, the flock was perched in the topmost branches of the charred and leafless trees. The skirling of the pipes grew louder. The crump, 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 crump of marching feet grew nearer, and once again the Scottish Fusiliers came tramping out of the forest. "Caw, caw, caw!" screamed a peacock. "Will you look at that? They're carrying some old burnt bagpipes on a stretcher. That is, good grief, it isn't pipes at all. It's our Plaid Peacock, roasted to a turn, no doubt." The soldiers halted in midfield. Tenderly they lowered the Plaid Peacock to the ground, and then, as the flock watched in open-beaked amazement, he raised the singed feathers of his train in a ragged salute. The soldiers cheered and threw their hats in the air. The pipers blew the merriest marching time they knew. And away they went, leaving the Plaid Peacock safe at home where his happy mother would care for him until his feathers grew back. And grow back they did with brilliant stripes, some up and some down, some side to side, some narrow, some wide. All the other mothers decided that he was very stylish, and that they too would like to have children with plaid feathers. But none of them ever could manage it, not even when they built their nests in all the wrong places. So there's never been a Plaid Peacock since.